The Mafia boss celebrated his promotion until the black waitress leaned in and said, "Get out now." The night was filled with excitement and celebration. Inside a lavish private restaurant, the atmosphere was vibrant as the Mafia boss, Vito Marino, toasted to his recent promotion. The high-end decor sparkled under dim chandeliers, with golden plates, glistening wine glasses, and the hum of the elite socialites surrounding the long, polished marble table. Vito was in his element, powerful, confident, and in full control. His sharp suit, the kind that costs more than most people's yearly salary, fitted him perfectly, emphasizing his commanding stature. He was at the pinnacle of the Mafia world. But little did he know, the night was about to take an unexpected turn. As Vito sipped his wine and exchanged smug looks with his fellow crime bosses, his eyes caught a glimpse of her. She was just a waitress, or so he thought. Mia Carter had been serving at the restaurant for almost a year, quietly working to support her sick mother and young siblings. Mia had a grace that was unseen by most, yet Vito's gaze lingered a little longer than usual. She wore a simple black dress, far less extravagant than the gowns surrounding her, yet there was something about her that drew attention. Her soft, steady movements, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity, it made her stand out among the others. Vito turned back to his table, but not before noticing how the other guests snickered and whispered as Mia approached. She was used to it by now. She had heard it all, whispers about her clothes, her hair, her accent, anything they could find to belittle her. But Mia held her head high, her focus on her duties. Tonight, however, the guests' laughter seemed louder. One guest, a wealthy socialite with a smirk that could freeze anyone's blood, said something that made Mia's stomach twist. "Is it true that you work here because you can't get a real job?" The others at the table erupted into laughter. Mia, though humiliated, didn't respond. She just quietly refilled their wine glasses, praying that the night would pass without any more comments. But then, as she set down a glass near Vito's elbow, one of the guests reached out and deliberately spilled it across her black dress. "Clumsy," he sneered. The laughter grew louder, and Mia felt the sting of the insult. She could feel her face flush, her heart racing. But she held her composure, forcing herself to keep her emotions in check. But just as Mia turned to walk away, she noticed Vito's eyes on her once again. The laughter from the table seemed to fade into the background as Vito stood up. His dark eyes, which had been observing the scene from a distance, locked onto hers. A silence spread across the table as Vito took a step towards her. Mia's heart skipped a beat as she stood frozen in place. And then, in the quietest of voices, Vito said something that sent a chill down her spine. "You don't deserve this." As the words hung in the air, there was a shift in the atmosphere. The laughter from the table slowly died, replaced by a thick silence. Mia stood frozen, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "You don't deserve this," Vito repeated, his voice low but clear. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, it felt like the world around them had slowed down. Vito's dark eyes were locked onto hers, and Mia could feel the weight of his gaze. It was as though time had stopped, and there was no one else in the room but them. The guests at the table remained silent, staring at the two of them. Vito's words were unexpected, but they carried a power that Mia couldn't ignore. She had never expected anyone to speak up for her, let alone someone like him. Mafia bosses weren't known for their kindness or compassion. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something she had never seen before in people like him: genuine concern. He stepped closer to her, his towering presence imposing, yet there was something about him that made her feel less afraid. "I won't tolerate this," he said firmly, his eyes now scanning the room, challenging anyone to oppose him. The other guests, who had been laughing moments ago, shrank back, realizing that this was no ordinary man they were dealing with. They had all heard of Vito Marino. His reputation as a ruthless mafia boss preceded him. He had earned his place at the top through violence, cunning, and intimidation. But now, they were seeing a side of him they hadn't expected, a side that cared for the dignity of others. The socialite, who had spilled the wine across Mia's dress, tried to speak up, but Vito silenced him with a sharp glance. "Get out," Vito commanded, his voice cold and unwavering. The man froze, his face paling as Vito's cold stare never wavered. "You have no right to speak to her that way. Leave now." Slowly, the man stood, his arrogance replaced by fear as he realized the gravity of the situation. Vito turned to Mia, his gaze softening ever so slightly. "Are you all right?" Mia's hands were still trembling as she tried to compose herself. She had never expected this turn of events. In her wildest dreams, she had never imagined that a man like Vito Marino would stand up for her. She had always been the invisible one, the one people ignored or belittled. But here she was, standing in front of the most feared man in the city, and he was treating her with respect. Mia swallowed hard, nodding quickly. "I'm fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. She was far from fine. The humiliation she had endured moments ago still stung, and now, with all eyes on her, she felt exposed in a way she never had before. Vito looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he just watched her, and Mia felt a strange mix of fear and gratitude. "You don't have to stay in this environment," he said suddenly, his voice softer than before. "If you want, I can make sure you never have to deal with this again." The offer was unexpected, and Mia's mind raced. She had always dreamed of escaping the constant judgments, the constant belittling. But this was Vito Marino, the man whose power was built on fear and violence. Was it even possible for him to be genuine? Was he really offering her a chance to leave this world behind? She opened her mouth to respond, but words failed her. "Thank you," was all she could manage to say. Vito nodded, as if he understood the complexity of the situation. "If you ever need anything, Mia," he said, his voice low and steady, "you can come to me. No one will ever treat you like that again." His words, though simple, carried a weight that made Mia's chest tighten. She had never been treated like this before, and for a moment, it almost felt like a dream. Vito turned away from her then, dismissing the other guests with a flick of his wrist. The socialite, still shocked by the turn of events, hurriedly left the room, while the others followed, their laughter gone, replaced by murmurs of disbelief. As the last of the guests left, Mia stood there, unsure of what to do next. She glanced over at Vito, who had returned to his seat, his back turned to her. But before she could leave, he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Mia, I meant what I said. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than you are." His words hung in the air, leaving Mia with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be different. She nodded to him, a small but genuine smile on her lips, and walked out of the room, her heart beating faster than it ever had before. The days following the incident were a blur for Mia. She went back to her normal routine, serving guests, cleaning tables, and trying to keep a low profile. But things were different now. There was a shift in the air every time she entered a room. Whispers followed her, but they were no longer the cruel taunts she was used to. Instead, people seemed to be watching her with a mix of curiosity and respect. As for Vito Marino, he never made a move to reach out. Yet, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something she couldn't quite place. For the first time in months, she had hope. It was a fleeting hope, but it was enough to keep her going. One afternoon, as Mia was taking a break in the staff room, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated, but answered. "Mia Carter?" a deep voice asked. It was unmistakably Vito's. Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes?" she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's Vito Marino," he said, his tone businesslike, but not without a trace of something warmer. "I need to speak with you. Can you come by my office tomorrow?" Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had heard rumors about the Mafia boss's dealings, but the idea that he was calling her, of all people, sent her into a spiral of confusion. She never thought she would be involved with him again, especially after that night. I don't know if I should," she began, her voice faltering. "You should," Vito interrupted firmly. "It's important." He didn't say another word before hanging up. Mia was left staring at her phone, uncertain of what to do. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face Vito again, but the promise of his attention, and the words he had spoken, lingered in her mind. The next day, Mia found herself standing outside the sleek office building that housed Vito's operations. She had never been this far into his world, and the thought of stepping inside made her nervous. But she had come this far, and she couldn't back out now. As the elevator doors opened to the top floor, Mia was greeted by a tall man in a suit, who wordlessly led her to a conference room. Vito was sitting at the head of the long, polished table, his back straight and his eyes scanning over his set of documents. As Mia entered the room, he didn't look up immediately, but she could feel his presence, cold and commanding. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. She sat across from him, her hands trembling slightly. Vito finally looked up, his gaze steady and unflinching. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence hung heavily in the room, broken only by the distant hum of the city outside. Vito was the first to break it. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly, "for what happened that night. You've shown me something I rarely see, courage." Mia swallowed, trying to process his words. She didn't know how to respond. Was he acknowledging her as a person, or was this just another one of his games? "I don't know what to say," she murmured. Vito leaned forward slightly, his expression softening for just a moment. "You don't have to say anything. But I've been thinking about you." Mia's heart raced. "Thinking about me?" she echoed, her voice shaky. He nodded. "You've been through a lot, and I want to help. I can offer you something more than this life." Mia shook her head. "I don't want anything from you," she said quickly, the words tumbling out before she could stop. I don't belong in your world. I want to live a quiet life." Vito didn't seem offended by her words. Instead, he just studied her carefully, as though weighing her very soul. "I get it," he said after a long pause. "But you're smarter than you think. You deserve more than you've been given." His words hung in the air, and Mia felt a chill run through her. She wasn't sure if she should be afraid or grateful. "What are you asking?" she finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm asking if you'd like a way out," Vito said, his tone cool but firm. "I can arrange something for you. A different future, away from this place." Mia's mind raced. A different future. That was the dream, wasn't it? To escape this life of service, to step out of the shadows and live on her own terms. But could she trust him? Could she trust a man like Vito Marino? She looked at him for a long time, trying to read his expression, trying to understand his intentions. And then, for the first time since she had met him, she saw something that made her pause. Sincerity. Vito wasn't playing a game. He wasn't offering her riches or power. He was offering her a chance to walk away, to change her life. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt the pull of something bigger than herself. Mia looked at Vito, her voice steady now. "What's the catch?" Vito leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "There's no catch, Mia. Just a choice." Mia sat across from Vito, the weight of his words pressing down on her. He had given her an offer she never expected, an offer to escape, to leave behind the life of serving tables and living in the shadows. But it wasn't just the offer that unsettled her. It was the look in his eyes, the sincerity, the unwavering confidence he had that made her feel like this wasn't a simple transaction. This was a choice that could change everything. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The room was still, the hum of the city outside barely noticeable, as if the whole world had paused while she made this decision. "I'm not sure," Mia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It sounds too good to be true." Vito leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to see the truth. You've been living in a world where you're invisible, where you're just a server, just a maid. But I see you, Mia. I've seen the way you carry yourself. You don't belong in that world. You deserve more." His words sent a shiver down her spine. Mia had spent so much of her life just trying to survive, trying to keep her head down and get through each day. She had never considered that she deserved more. It had always felt like a fantasy, a distant dream that could never come true. And now, here was a man who was offering her a chance to make that dream a reality. "What would I have to do?" Mia asked, her heart racing. Vito smiled, but there was no amusement in it, just a quiet assurance. "You would do what you've always done, keep your dignity. But you wouldn't be doing it for scraps anymore. You'd be working for yourself, with the freedom to choose what happens next. No more being overlooked. No more living in fear of what tomorrow might bring." Mia felt the weight of his words settle over her. She had spent so much time just getting by, living paycheck to paycheck, and wondering if things would ever change. The idea of having control over her future, the idea of not being at the mercy of cruel customers or powerful men, was overwhelming. It sounded impossible, like a dream she couldn't afford to have. "And if I say no?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Vito's gaze never wavered. If you say no, nothing changes. You'll go back to the same life you have now, the same struggles, the same pain. But I'll make sure you're never hurt again. You'll have protection, you'll have a place to stay, and you won't have to worry about being mistreated. But that's all you'll have. Mia looked down at her hands, her fingers tightly gripping the edge of the chair. She had always dreamed of a way out, but now that it was being offered to her, she wasn't sure she was brave enough to take it. The life she knew, even though it was hard and painful, was familiar. It was safe in its own way, even if it meant being invisible. The unknown, the possibility of something better, scared her. But then she remembered the way she felt that night when Vito stood up for her. She remembered how it felt to be seen, to have someone acknowledge her, to be treated with dignity. That moment had awakened something in her, something that made her feel like she could do more, be more. I need to think about it, Mia said softly, not looking up. Vito nodded slowly, as if he understood. Take your time, he said, his voice calm. But don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't come often. Mia stood up, her legs feeling weak. She wasn't sure what the right decision was, but she knew one thing. She couldn't keep living the way she had been. Something had to change. As she walked out of the room, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What was she really afraid of? Was it the fear of stepping into a new world, or was it the fear of failing, of losing everything she had worked so hard for? For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream of a different life, one where she wasn't invisible, where she could stand tall and be proud of who she was. But could she take that step? Could she trust Vito and everything he represented? She didn't know the answers, but for the first time, she didn't feel quite so alone. As Mia stepped into the elevator, she pressed the button for the ground floor, her heart still racing. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing. Her life would never be the same again. The days after her meeting with Vito were filled with a mixture of uncertainty and possibility. Mia had spent so much of her life in survival mode, always moving from one day to the next, never imagining that someone like Vito Marino would offer her a way out. And now, with the weight of his words still echoing in her mind, she found herself standing at a crossroads. As she walked through the busy streets of the city, the noise and chaos of her surroundings felt distant, as though she were walking in a different world. The life she had known for so long suddenly seemed small, like a cage she had outgrown. She had always dreamed of a life where she could make her own choices, free from the constant judgments and insults of those who saw her as nothing more than a servant. But now that the opportunity was before her, she wasn't sure if she was brave enough to take it. The more she thought about Vito's offer, the more conflicted she felt. He had offered her a future where she could walk away from her current life and find something better. But there was a price to be paid for that future, a price she wasn't sure she was ready to pay. As the days passed, Mia found herself going over every detail of their conversation in her head. She had spent her entire life working to survive, never allowing herself to dream of anything more. She had always believed that people like her didn't get second chances, that the world was a place where the powerful trampled on the weak, and those who were invisible stayed that way. But Vito's offer had shattered that belief. He had seen her, really seen her, in a way no one ever had before. And that made her question everything she had believed about herself and the world around her. One evening, as she was finishing her shift at the restaurant, Mia found herself standing in front of the mirror in the staff bathroom. The reflection staring back at her was a stranger. She looked the same, tired, worn out, with dark circles under her eyes. But there was something different. She could feel it deep inside her. The woman in the mirror was no longer the quiet, invisible girl who had worked endless shifts without complaint. She was someone else, someone who had the power to change her life, if she was willing to take the leap. But was she ready? As she walked out of the bathroom, she found herself face to face with one of the regular customers, a man who always treated her with contempt. He was standing near the bar, talking to a friend, when he noticed her. "Hey, maid, hurry up and bring me a drink," he sneered, his words dripping with disdain. The other customers around them snickered. Mia's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. She had always let his insults slide off her, but this time, something inside her snapped. She walked up to him, her steps steady, and met his gaze. "I'm not your maid," she said, her voice firm, stronger than she had ever heard it before. The man looked at her, his smirk fading. "What did you say?" he scoffed, clearly taken aback. "I'm not your maid," Mia repeated, her voice unwavering. "And you don't get to treat me like that anymore." For a moment, there was silence. The other customers watched, unsure of how to react. The man stared at her, his mouth slightly open, before he finally turned and walked away, muttering something under his breath. Mia stood there, her heart racing. She had never done that before, had never stood up for herself in such a direct way. But now that she had, she felt a surge of power, a sense of freedom that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. As the night went on, Mia found herself moving with a new sense of confidence. She walked through the restaurant with her head held high, no longer shrinking or fading into the background. She was no longer just the waitress, no longer just the invisible girl. She was someone with a voice, someone who could stand up for herself. After her shift, Mia went home, her mind still racing. She had done something she never thought she would. She had stood up to someone who had always belittled her. And it felt good. It felt like she had finally taken control of her life, even if just for a moment. The next morning, as Mia prepared to leave for work, she found herself standing in front of the mirror again. This time, she didn't look like the same woman who had been uncertain and afraid. She looked strong, determined. She had made a decision. She wasn't going to wait any longer. She was going to take the opportunity Vito had offered her. Mia picked up her phone and dialed the number Vito had given her. Her hand trembled slightly, but she took a deep breath and pressed the call button. As the phone rang, she wondered what would happen next. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing. She was ready for a change. And for the first time, she felt like she could finally take that leap. The days following her decision were filled with uncertainty and excitement. Mia had made the call to Vito. She had taken the leap, choosing to leave behind everything she knew. The weight of her choice settled on her shoulders, but for the first time in years, she felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. The world outside her small apartment seemed different, brighter even. The promise of something more was finally within reach. As the days went by, Mia spent her free time thinking about what her life could be like. She had always believed that she was destined for a life of servitude, never dreaming that she could be more. Now, the idea of a future where she wasn't invisible, where she could have control over her own destiny, was overwhelming. The offer from Vito had come with so many questions. Was it truly an escape? Or would she be stepping into a world that was just as dark and dangerous as the one she was leaving behind? As she prepared herself to meet Vito again, she couldn't help but wonder if she was making a mistake. But when she thought about the humiliation, the way people had treated her over the years, she knew deep down that she couldn't continue living the way she had. She had to take the chance. The night of the meeting arrived. Mia stood outside a sleek building in the heart of the city, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The building was tall and imposing, its glass windows reflecting the city's bright lights. Mia's hands were clammy, her heart racing as she stared up at the building. She had never been inside a place like this before. The doors opened, and she stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the quiet lobby. She was greeted by a man in a suit who didn't say a word but motioned for her to follow him. As they walked down a long hallway, Mia's thoughts raced. What had she gotten herself into? She had no idea what to expect, and yet, a part of her was excited. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, a chance to finally take control of her life. She couldn't turn back now. When they reached the door, the man knocked once before opening it. Vito was sitting at a large desk, papers scattered in front of him. He didn't look up at first but then slowly raised his gaze to meet hers. There was something different in his eyes this time, something softer, more understanding. "Mia," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I'm glad you came." Mia swallowed, trying to steady herself. She hadn't expected to feel so nervous. "I'm here," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Vito motioned for her to sit across from him. "I know this is a big decision for you," he said, his voice low. "But I want you to understand something. You're not just leaving behind your job. You're leaving behind a life that never valued you, a life where you were always overlooked, always treated as less than." Mia's heart tightened as he spoke. It was the truth. For so long, she had been nothing more than a background character in her own life, invisible to everyone around her. But now, Vito was offering her something more: respect, freedom, a chance to be seen. "I know it's scary," Vito continued, his gaze never leaving hers. But I'm offering you a place in my world. Not as a servant, not as someone beneath me, but as someone who has a future. Mia couldn't help but feel the weight of his words. She had spent so long wondering if she was worthy of anything more than the life she had. And now, here was someone telling her that she was. For the first time, she began to believe it. What would I have to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vito leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You would have to trust me, he said. But more importantly, you would have to trust yourself. You would have to believe that you are more than the world has made you believe. And you would have to be willing to stand up for yourself, no matter what. Mia nodded slowly. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that whatever it was better than the life she had been living. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady now. Vito's lips curled into a small smile. Good. Then we begin. As he stood up, he extended his hand to her. Mia took it, feeling the power in his grip. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was walking into a future that she could control. A future where she wasn't invisible, where she was worthy of respect. As they walked out of the office together, Mia knew that this was just the beginning. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. But for the first time in years, she was ready to face whatever came next. The weeks that followed felt like a dream and a nightmare all at once for Mia. As she started to settle into the new role that Vito had promised her, she quickly realized that her life was shifting in ways she had never imagined. The world she had known, working late shifts at the restaurant, dealing with rude customers, and living paycheck to paycheck, was slipping away, but it wasn't being replaced by the comfortable, easy life she had dreamed of. Instead, she was stepping into a different kind of reality, a world filled with power, danger, and the constant pressure to prove herself. Vito had kept his promise. He provided her with a beautiful apartment in the heart of the city, far from the cramped apartment she had lived in before. He ensured that her mother's medical bills were taken care of, that her family was safe, and that Mia had the freedom to choose her future. But with the luxury came responsibility. Mia quickly learned that she couldn't just live as a passive observer in this new world. She had to make her own decisions, navigate relationships with people who were more dangerous than anyone she had encountered in her life, and prove her worth not just to Vito, but to everyone around her. One evening, as Mia walked into Vito's office, she was greeted by his usual calm demeanor, but there was something different in the air. He looked up from his desk, his sharp eyes scanning her face, and without a word, he gestured for her to sit. There's something I need you to understand, he said, his voice low but serious. You're no longer invisible. People will see you, Mia, but that also means they will try to take advantage of you. This is the world I live in. It's not a game. It's not a fairy tale. And you need to learn how to protect yourself. Mia sat across from him, her heart racing as she tried to process his words. I don't understand, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Vito leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. People like me, we make our own rules. We take what we want. But it's a dangerous game. And now you're part of it. You need to start thinking like I do. You need to start seeing things from the top, not from below. Mia felt the weight of his words settle over her. The life she had once known, the life where she could hide in the shadows, was gone. She had stepped into a world where there was no room for weakness, no room for mistakes. But at the same time, she realized that for the first time in her life, she had a seat at the table. She wasn't just a maid or a waitress anymore. She was someone who mattered. What do you want me to do? Mia asked, her voice steady now, more confident than she had ever been. Vito stood up and walked toward the window, his back turned to her. I want you to observe. I want you to learn. Watch how people react when they know you're no longer a nobody. Watch how they change their behavior, how they start to treat you differently. He paused, looking out at the city below. This is your new world, Mia, and you need to start owning it. Mia nodded, trying to absorb everything he was saying. She had never imagined that she would be in a position like this, but now that she was, she knew she couldn't waste the opportunity. She wasn't sure what was ahead, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to face it. As the days passed, Mia found herself slowly adjusting to the new lifestyle. She began attending high-profile events, meeting influential people, and learning the delicate dance of power that Vito had introduced her to. She was no longer just a spectator in a world that had once seemed so distant. Now, she was an active participant. But with each new interaction, she learned something important. In this world, kindness was a rare commodity. People didn't show respect unless it was earned, and trust was a currency that was traded sparingly. Mia quickly realized that while she had the opportunity to change her life, she also had to protect herself. And Vito wasn't going to hold her hand through it. He was teaching her the harsh realities of the world he had built, and he wasn't going to make it easy. One night, as Mia was walking back to her apartment, she was stopped by one of Vito's associates, a man named Dominic, who had been observing her from afar. "You're doing well, Mia," he said with a smile, his eyes cold but calculating. "But remember, you're not just here to look pretty. You're here because Vito sees something in you. Don't make him regret it." Mia looked him in the eye, her heart pounding. "I won't," she said, her voice steady. Dominic studied her for a moment, then nodded, as if satisfied with her response. "Good. Don't forget who gave you this chance." As he walked away, Mia realized that she was no longer just the girl from the restaurant. She was someone people would watch, someone whose actions mattered. And that power, while intoxicating, also made her more vulnerable than she had ever been before. As she entered her apartment, she stood by the window, looking out over the city. Everything had changed. She wasn't sure where this new path would lead her, but she was ready for whatever came next. For the first time in her life, Mia felt like she was in control, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. Mia had learned the hard way that in this new life, there was no room for hesitation, no space for self-doubt. Vito's words still echoed in her mind as she navigated her new world. Every day, she faced challenges that tested her in ways she had never experienced. But with every challenge, she grew stronger. She began to understand the game she was playing, even if she wasn't fully comfortable with it yet. There were moments when she questioned everything, the life she had left behind, the choices she had made, and whether this was truly the future she had imagined. But in those moments, she would remember the feeling of power, the quiet confidence she saw in herself for the first time in her life. Mia had attended her first gala, an exclusive event filled with the wealthiest and most influential people in the city. She was no longer just a waitress in the background, but a player in this game. She had made her presence known, and Vito had taken notice. At the gala, Mia was introduced to more Vitos associates, some of whom were welcoming, while others were cautious, eyeing her with the kind of scrutiny that made her feel like a pawn in a much larger game. One man, in particular, stood out to her, Dominic, Vito's trusted advisor. He was tall, with sharp features and an air of quiet authority that made people naturally gravitate towards him. As they exchanged pleasantries, Mia could tell that Dominic was studying her, gauging her reactions, trying to figure out if she was truly capable of handling the world Vito had placed her in. "You've made quite an impression on Vito," Dominic remarked, his voice smooth but guarded. "Not many people get his attention so quickly." Mia met his gaze, holding her ground. "I'm just trying to learn," she replied, her tone calm but firm. Dominic raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her response. "Learning is one thing, but in this world, you have to earn respect. It doesn't come easy." Mia nodded, understanding the unspoken challenge in his words. She knew she had to prove herself, not just to Vito but to everyone else who was watching. The pressure weighed on her, but there was a fire inside her now, a fire that refused to let her shrink back into the shadows. As the evening wore on, Mia continued to mingle, her mind constantly analyzing the people around her, looking for clues, watching for patterns. She had learned quickly that in this world, nothing was ever as it seemed. Trust was a rare commodity, and every interaction had the potential to shape her future. But she was starting to realize that she had a unique advantage. Unlike the others, Mia had nothing to lose. She had lived most of her life on the fringes, and now, for the first time, she was in a position where she could carve her own path. The next few days were a blur of meetings and events, each one more intense than the last. But it was during one of these meetings that Mia found herself face to face with a new challenge, one that would test her loyalty and her resolve. Vito had asked her to accompany him to a meeting with a rival faction, a group that had been encroaching on his territory. The tension in the air was palpable as they entered the room, the men in suits standing around the large table, their eyes narrowing as they assessed Mia's presence. Vito sat at the head of the table, his demeanor calm, but his eyes sharp as he surveyed the room. "This is Mia," he said, his voice smooth but commanding. "She's here to observe." Mia's heart raced as all eyes turned to her. She could feel the weight of their gazes, the silent judgment. But she didn't flinch. She had learned by now that in this world, weakness was a liability. As the meeting progressed, Mia listened intently, taking in every word, every gesture. She watched as Vito negotiated with the men, his tone authoritative but measured. He never seemed to break a sweat, never seemed to falter. And as the meeting drew to a close, Vito turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with an unspoken understanding. "You did well," he said quietly, as they walked out of the room together. "You're learning quickly." Mia's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. She was starting to see the world through a different lens, one where power, control, and influence were the keys to survival. But with that understanding came a responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. As she left the building, her mind raced. She had just witnessed the delicate balance of power that Vito controlled, and she realized that if she wanted to survive in this world, she would have to become just as calculating, just as ruthless. The city lights shone brightly in the distance, a reminder of everything she had to gain and everything she had to lose. Mia had made a decision. She would not go back to the life she had. She would rise to the challenge, no matter the cost. She would become the woman Vito saw in her, the woman who was not afraid to take control of her destiny. Mia's life had changed in ways she hadn't expected. After the tense meeting with Vito's rival faction, she found herself thrown into a whirlwind of responsibility and power plays. She was no longer just an observer in the world of mafia bosses and underworld politics. She was now an active player, with her own stake in the game. The more she learned about the intricacies of Vito's world, the more she realized how deep the stakes were. The power struggles, the constant backstabbing, the alliances forged and broken with the mere blink of an eye. It was a dangerous world, one that could destroy anyone who wasn't prepared to play by its rules. But Mia had never been more determined in her life. She had no intention of returning to the life of invisibility she had once known. In the days that followed, she kept her distance from most of the underlings and associates that worked closely with Vito. She had always been good at reading people, and she knew that trust didn't come easily in this world. It was a currency that had to be earned, and right now, Mia had no intention of giving it away freely. The one person who continued to watch her closely, however, was Dominic. He had a way of observing people that made Mia feel like he was always one step ahead. The first time he approached her after the meeting, he had said little, but his sharp eyes had said everything. It was as if he were measuring her, weighing her value in this world. "You're doing better than most," Dominic said one evening as Mia was preparing to leave one of the events Vito had taken her to. His voice was low, calculated, his words always carrying a hint of something else beneath the surface. Mia gave him a wary look, but kept her tone steady. "I'm just doing what's required," she replied, though she wasn't entirely sure if she meant it. Dominic smiled faintly, as if he had expected this answer. "Everyone says that at first, but you and I both know it's more than that. You've got the drive. But I'm curious, what is it that you really want, Mia?" The question caught her off guard. What did she really want? She had never asked herself that before. She had always been focused on surviving, on getting by. But now, in this world of power and politics, she was beginning to realize that survival wasn't enough. She wanted more. "I want respect," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. Dominic's eyes gleamed with interest. "Respect is something that has to be earned," he said. "But I think you know that better than anyone." His words hung in the air, and Mia couldn't help but feel like he was testing her. She had spent so long being overlooked, being treated like a nobody. But now that she had a chance at something more, she wasn't about to let it slip away. As the days went on, Mia found herself becoming more adept at navigating the dangerous waters of Vito's world. She learned how to use people's insecurities against them, how to make allies out of enemies, and how to protect herself from those who would try to bring her down. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. But with this new power came new threats. Mia quickly realized that in this world, no one was truly safe. Even Vito, with all his power, had enemies. And some of those enemies were closer than Mia had anticipated. One night, as she sat in Vito's office, going over a set of documents, she heard a knock at the door. Vito looked up from his paperwork, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Come in," he said, his voice calm but alert. The door opened, and a man stepped inside, his face familiar but unsettling. Mia recognized him immediately. He was one of Vito's old associates, someone she had seen only briefly in the past, but whose presence now made her skin crawl. The man didn't speak at first, just stared at Vito with a mixture of disdain and calculation. "We need to talk," the man finally said, his voice low. Vito's eyes didn't leave him. "Talk," Vito replied, his tone colder now. "But I'm not in the mood for games." The man smirked, as if he knew exactly what was coming next. "You think you can control everything, Vito," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "But the truth is, the power you've built is fragile. And there are people who are starting to notice that." The room was thick with tension. Mia could feel the hairs on the back of her neck standing up as she watched the exchange unfold. She had seen this kind of confrontation before, silent, dangerous, the kind that could erupt at any moment. Vito didn't flinch. "If you're here to threaten me," he said, his voice calm and steady, "you've made a mistake." The man laughed softly, almost mockingly. "No, Vito. I'm here to remind you that the game is changing, and you might not be in control much longer." Vito's gaze hardened, and Mia could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. He didn't need to say anything. The look in his eyes was enough. "Leave," he said simply, his voice leaving. No room for argument. The man hesitated, then turned and walked out of the room without another word. As the door closed behind him, Mia looked at Vito, her mind racing. "What was that about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vito didn't answer right away. He simply stared at the door for a moment before turning his gaze back to her. "It's a reminder," he said quietly, "that in this world, no one stays at the top forever." Mia felt a chill run through her. She had known that the world Vito inhabited was dangerous, but now she understood just how fragile that power could be. And she realized that the game she had entered wasn't one she could ever truly escape. Mia stood in Vito's office, her mind racing after the tense encounter with his old associate. The man's words still echoed in her head, a stark reminder of the fragility of power, even the power of someone like Vito. The room felt colder now, the heavy weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had been thrust into this world, into a game she was only just beginning to understand, and she wasn't sure if she was prepared for the consequences that came with it. The sound of Vito's voice broke through her thoughts. "It's nothing, Mia. Don't worry about it." He spoke with a calmness that was almost unnerving, but Mia could tell it wasn't nothing. The way his eyes had narrowed, the tension in his jaw, it was clear that something was off. "But you're not worried?" she asked, her voice betraying the uncertainty she felt. Vito met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Worried? About a man who thinks he can undermine me," he said with a smirk. "Not in the slightest." But Mia could sense the underlying tension in his words. There was something brewing, something more dangerous than she had realized. "So, what do we do now?" she asked, trying to make sense of the situation. Vito stood up, walking toward the window and staring out at the city below. The night lights twinkled, reflecting the power he wielded, but there was something in his posture that made Mia uneasy. "Now," he said slowly, "we wait." Mia's brow furrowed. "Wait for what?" "Wait for the storm to pass," Vito replied, turning to face her. "In this world, you never know when. Trouble will find you. But when it does, you have to be ready to face it head on." He paused for a moment, his eyes locking with hers. "I trust you, Mia, but you have to prove you can handle the weight of what's coming." Mia nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure what exactly Vito was referring to, but she understood one thing. Her place in this world was no longer guaranteed. She had to prove herself, prove that she could be more than just a pawn in someone else's game. The following days were filled with tension. Vito kept his distance, focusing on meetings and negotiations, while Mia remained on edge, unsure of what the next move would be. She was no longer the quiet, invisible girl who worked in the background. She was someone who mattered now, someone who was being watched by everyone around her. But with that came its own set of challenges. She was constantly sizing up the people around her, trying to gauge their motives, their allegiances. There were no longer any easy friendships, no simple alliances. She had to navigate every interaction with caution, never letting her guard down. One evening, as Mia walked back to her apartment, she found herself lost in thought, wondering if she had made the right choice. She had come so far from the life she had known, But was it worth the price she was paying? She had power now, respect even, but at what cost? As she turned the corner, she was startled by a voice calling her name. She spun around to find Dominic standing behind her, his face expressionless, his posture casual but guarded. "Dominic," Mia said, her voice steady despite the surprise. "What are you doing here?" He took a step closer, his eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I was just following up," he said, his tone casual but with an edge to it. "I've been watching you, Mia. You've been doing well, better than I expected." His words sent a chill down her spine. "What do you want, Dominic?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the anxiety she felt. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "What do I want? I want to make sure you understand the game you're playing. You've come a long way, but there's still a lot you don't know. And in this world, ignorance can cost you everything." His words hung in the air, and Mia felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew Dominic wasn't just being friendly. He was warning her, challenging her, testing her resolve. "I can handle myself," she replied, her voice firm. Dominic studied her for a long moment, his gaze piercing. "We'll see," he said quietly before turning and walking away. Mia watched him disappear into the night, her mind spinning. Dominic's warning echoed in her ears, and she couldn't help but wonder if she was truly ready for the dangers that lay ahead. The following morning, Mia met Vito at a private club, a luxurious place that catered to the elite. As she walked through the opulent hallways, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the life she had chosen. This wasn't just about money or power, it was about survival. Vito was waiting for her in a private room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He smiled when he saw her. "You're late," he teased, his voice light. But Mia could see the tension in his eyes. He was always on edge, always watching, always calculating. "I was thinking about everything," she said, sitting down across from him. "About Dominic's words." Vito's expression darkened slightly, but he didn't comment on it. "Don't let anyone scare you, Mia. Not even Dominic. He's always testing people, trying to figure out who's strong and who's weak. Don't show any weakness." Mia met his gaze, her voice steady. "I'm not weak." Vito's lips curled into a small smile. "I know, and that's why I trust you." But Mia knew that trust was a fragile thing in this world. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, not with Vito, not with Dominic, not with anyone. As the days passed, Mia felt herself sinking deeper into the game. She was no longer the naive girl who had stepped into this world. She was someone who could play the game and win. But as she moved further into Vito's world, she knew that the stakes were getting higher, and that one wrong move could cost her everything. Mia stood at the edge of her new world, her thoughts swirling as the weight of the past few days pressed down on her. She had played the game, learned its rules, and had made her presence known. But now, in the aftermath of her latest challenges, she was beginning to understand just how high the stakes really were. As much as she wanted to push forward, she couldn't shake the lingering doubts. The world Vito had introduced her to wasn't just one of power and wealth. It was a world of manipulation, control, and constant danger. Even though Vito had placed his trust in her, she knew that no one was safe in this game, not even the people at the top. Vito's office had become both a sanctuary and a reminder of the fight that was ahead. The day after their conversation, Mia had spent hours analyzing her options. She had seen the cracks in Vito's empire, the tensions simmering beneath the surface. People like Dominic, people with their own hidden agendas, were watching her, waiting for her to slip. She had no illusions about the reality she was living in. Trust was fragile, and power was always shifting. But there was no turning back now. The choices she had made had brought her to this point, and Mia wasn't about to let anyone take that from her. The next evening, Mia attended one of Vito's high-profile parties, a gathering of influential figures in the city's elite circles. It was the perfect opportunity to cement her place in Vito's world, to show that she wasn't just another pawn in the game. As she entered the lavish mansion, the glittering chandeliers and the murmur of whispered conversations reminded her just how different everything had become. She wasn't just the invisible waitress anymore. She was a player, someone who could influence the direction of things if she was smart enough. Vito had instructed her to keep a low profile, but Mia knew better. She had already learned the art of observation, how to watch and listen, how to pick up on the subtle shifts in the room. She could feel the eyes on her as she walked through the grand hall. Some were curious, some were skeptical, and others were calculating. But Mia didn't flinch. She met their gazes with the quiet confidence she had developed in her time with Vito. After a while, she found herself face to face with Dominic, who was standing near the bar, his usual cold smile in place. "I see you're making yourself comfortable," he said, his eyes scanning her as if she were still. A puzzle he was trying to figure out. "Comfortable enough to stand out, maybe," Mia replied, her tone casual but sharp. Dominic raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "Vito wasn't wrong about you. You've got the fire. But in this world, fire can burn you if you're not careful." Mia tilted her head slightly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I'm not here to play it safe," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here to win." Dominic chuckled softly, the sound devoid of humor. "You're not the only one who wants to win, Mia. But remember, there are always people watching. You have to be careful who you trust." Mia felt the weight of his words settle on her, but she didn't back down. She had learned quickly that in this world, survival meant knowing when to act and when to wait. The night wore on, and Mia found herself in the midst of several tense conversations with some of the most powerful people in the room. It was clear that the dynamics were shifting. Alliances were being tested, and everyone was jockeying for position. Vito had created something impressive, but Mia was beginning to see the cracks in the foundation. Even he wasn't invincible. As the night came to a close, Mia found herself alone on the balcony, the city lights shimmering in the distance. The cool breeze washed over her, and for a moment, she allowed herself to reflect on how far she had come. It felt like a lifetime ago when she had been just a girl working to make ends meet, hiding from the world. Now, she was in the thick of it, facing challenges she never could have imagined. The sound of footsteps behind her brought her back to the present. She turned to see Vito approaching, his usual calm expression in place. "You did well tonight," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "You've proven you can handle yourself in this world." Mia nodded, but there was a lingering unease in her chest. "There's more to this world than just power, isn't there?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vito studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her question. "There's more to everything than you think, Mia," he said quietly. "But power is what makes the world move. And right now, you're in the perfect position to make it work for you." Mia looked out over the city, the lights flickering below. She had learned that in this world, nothing was guaranteed. Loyalty was rare, and even the strongest alliances could crumble. But for the first time, Mia felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was living, shaping her own future. It was a dangerous game, but she was ready to play. As the night continued, Mia felt the weight of the choices she had made settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just Vito's protege anymore. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with. But with that power came responsibility, and Mia knew she had to be careful not to lose herself in the process. The game was far from over, and the path ahead was uncertain. But Mia was no longer afraid to walk it. The weeks that followed were a blur of sharp turns and quiet reflection. Mia had stepped fully into Vito's world, but each day she felt the weight of it more acutely. The dazzling glamour of the parties, the respect she commanded in certain circles, and the promises of power were tempered by a dark undercurrent. There was always the danger of losing control, of trusting the wrong people, and of finding out that the thin veneer of civility was easily peeled away. But Mia wasn't someone who could go back. The taste of power, even fleeting, was something she couldn't unknow. She wasn't invisible anymore, and no one could take that away from her. But with this new life came expectations. Expectations that stretched beyond her comfort zone and pushed her further into Vito's world than she was prepared for. One night, as the city buzzed beneath the sprawling windows of Vito's penthouse, Mia found herself contemplating the path she had chosen. The weight of Vito's trust, the responsibility it brought, was heavy. But as much as she tried to block it out, there was a part of her that thrived in the uncertainty of it all. The quiet power, the ability to move in the shadows and twist the game in her favor. It was exhilarating. She wasn't just playing anymore. She was winning. The phone rang, its harsh buzz breaking her thoughts. Mia picked it up, not surprised to hear Vito's voice. "Mia, I need you here. We're meeting with some of the upper echelon. Be prepared." His voice, ever calm, gave no hint of the gravity of the situation. Mia's pulse quickened. A meeting with the top players? That wasn't a casual affair. She had been to several meetings with Vito, but this was different. This wasn't just about business. It was about positioning herself in the delicate web of power and influence. She had learned from Vito that in this world, allegiances could shift with a single word, a single action. She couldn't afford to slip up now. Mia dressed quickly, pulling on a sleek black dress that suited her newfound confidence. She was no longer the shy waitress who hid in the background. She was someone who belonged in these rooms, in these high-stakes situations. When she arrived at the venue, the energy in the room was charged. The men and women around her exuded power. Each one of them someone she had only heard about in whispers, people whose names were spoken in hushed tones. And yet, they all turned their attention to Vito when he entered, his presence dominating the room like a force of nature. Mia stood at his side, silent, her eyes scanning the room as she had learned to do. Every handshake, every look, every shift in posture was a signal, an invitation, a challenge, a warning. She kept her face neutral, but inside, her mind was calculating, analyzing. She had learned that in this world, every action spoke louder than words. Mia, Vito said quietly, pulling her into a conversation with a man she hadn't seen before. He was older, with graying hair and a sharp, calculating smile. This is Matteo. He has interests in several areas we've been keeping an eye on. The man's eyes flickered over to Mia as she shook his hand, his gaze lingering just long enough to be noticed. You're the one Vito's been talking about, Matteo said, his voice smooth but edged with something Mia couldn't place. She met his gaze and smiled faintly. I'm here to learn, she said, keeping her tone calm. Matteo's smile widened, but there was something in his eyes that made her uneasy. Learning's a dangerous game, Miss Carter. You're stepping into a world where trust is earned and quickly betrayed. The warning was clear, but it didn't faze Mia. She knew this world, knew its dangers. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of them. As the meeting progressed, Mia stood by Vito's side, observing the exchanges, the subtle power plays. She saw how alliances shifted, how small favors were traded for larger ones, how Vito navigated every conversation with ease. There was no doubt in her mind. Vito was a master at this game, and he had made her his protege. The evening wore on, and Mia found herself in a quiet conversation with another woman, someone who had made her way to the top in Vito's world. The woman was confident, sharp, and not easily fooled. So, you're the new face in Vito's circle, she said, her tone both curious and cautious. How long do you think you'll last? The question was blunt, but Mia wasn't thrown off by it. As long as it takes, Mia replied, her voice steady. The woman studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good. Keep your eyes open, girl. This isn't a world for the faint of heart. But if you play it right, you could end up on top. The words were a reminder of the price of power in this world. There were no easy victories, no clear-cut paths. Every day was a battle to prove that she deserved her place. And Mia was willing to fight. As the night drew to a close, Mia found herself stepping out into the crisp night air, her thoughts racing. She had made it this far, but she knew that the challenges were far from over. The game was just beginning, and Mia wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. She had power now, but it was fragile. One wrong move, one misstep, and everything could come crashing down. But for the first time, Mia was ready. Ready to face whatever came next. Ready to prove that she belonged in this world. The night was quiet, the city lights casting a soft glow over the streets as Mia sat in her apartment, reflecting on everything that had led her here. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had been just a waitress, trying to make ends meet, living in the shadows of a world she had never imagined herself a part of. Now, she was at the center of it all, her life intertwined with Vito's empire, her future uncertain but full of potential. The power, the respect, the stakes, everything had changed in ways she hadn't fully understood when she first stepped into this world. But now she could feel it. She was no longer just a bystander. She had made her mark. Mia had played the game, watched the moves of those around her, and learned from the best. Vito had trusted her, given her the tools to navigate this complex web of alliances and rivalries, and now it was time for her to step into her own. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on her shoulders, but it didn't scare her. If anything, it motivated her. She was no longer the invisible girl in the background. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had the power to shape her own destiny. But with this power came danger. Mia had seen the faces of those who had been burned by this world. People who had trusted the wrong person or made a mistake they couldn't come back from. She had seen how quickly things could unravel, how alliances could turn into betrayals in the blink of an eye. She had learned that loyalty wasn't just given, it had to be earned. Trust wasn't something that came easily, and even those closest to you could turn their backs when it suited them. As the days went by, Mia found herself more deeply embedded in the world Vito had built. She attended meetings, made deals, and rubbed elbows with the city's most powerful figures. But she never let her guard down. Every conversation was a potential opportunity or a potential threat. Every handshake could lead to a partnership or a trap. Yet, through it all, she felt a sense of control, a confidence she had never known before. She had learned the game, and now she was playing it on her own terms. It was during one of these high-stakes meetings that Mia found herself standing across from one of Vito's oldest allies, a man named Carlo. His reputation was as solid as they came, and his word carried weight. But there was something off about him that Mia couldn't shake. The way he smiled too easily, the way his eyes always seemed to be calculating, as if he were waiting for her to slip up. As they discussed business, Mia kept her cool, her mind racing, scanning for any sign that he was testing her, trying to figure out where her loyalties lay. "You've come a long way, Mia," Carlo said, his voice smooth. "But remember, loyalty in this world is a currency, and not everyone is going to have your back." Mia looked him in the eye, her voice steady. "I know who I trust," she replied, not breaking his gaze. Carlo chuckled, his smile widening. "I'm sure you do. Just remember, you can't always count on that trust to keep you safe." Mia felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't let it show. She had learned to read people, and she could sense that Carlo was testing her, trying to see if she would flinch, if she would reveal any sign of weakness. But Mia wasn't afraid. She had been through too much to let anyone intimidate her now. She had fought for her place in this world, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it from her. As the meeting ended, Carlo extended his hand. Mia took it, her grip firm. "I'll be watching you, Mia," he said softly, his tone almost a warning. "Be careful who you trust." Mia nodded, giving him a polite smile, but inside, she was already plotting her next move. Carlo was dangerous, but she was no longer the girl who had once been afraid of the shadows. She knew how to play the game now, and she was determined to win. Over the next few weeks, Mia found herself gaining more ground. Her reputation spread throughout Vito's circles, and with it came new opportunities. Opportunities to expand her influence, to solidify her position in the empire Vito had built. But with every step forward, Mia felt the pull of the dangers lurking beneath the surface. It wasn't just the people like Carlo who she had to watch out for. It was the constant game of power, the shifting alliances, the betrayals that could happen at any moment. The higher she rose, the more enemies she would make, the more she had to lose. One evening, as Mia stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out over the city, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The girl who had once been invisible was now standing at the top, a player in a game that few could survive. The stakes had never been higher, but Mia was ready. She had proven herself, earned her place, and now, she was no longer just Vito's protege. She was her own woman, a force to be reckoned with. As the city lights flickered below, Mia made a promise to herself. She wasn't going to just survive. She was going to thrive, no matter what it took.